The concept of Battlefield 6 or 7, depending on how you view it, is quite a scary one for me, to be honest, because it means a big gap between this game and the next, with no real resources for content, and it also means starting the cycle anew with a new title. That means very exciting things, but also quite scary things. But I'm looking forward to the next Battlefield title. I'm enjoying 2042 as I always have, but I thought it'd be good to go over today some of the things I'd love to see in the next Battlefield that aren't in 2042, and some of the things I'd like to be carried over from 2042 into Battlefield 6 or 7, or whatever it ends up being. And also talking about how the game will present itself in terms of campaign, what will happen to Portal, and of course multiplayer. First of all, let's start with the setting. I would kind of like the same setting as 2042, but maybe slightly advanced in the future, just by a couple of years, maybe a decade or so, which would lean itself into having, these modern places that are war-torn, and hopefully the artistic team can really lean into that, and we can get some cool-looking soldiers, because I really like the setting of 2042, and if they're carrying on the story from 2042, I'd love to see that carried forward to the next game in terms of locations, setting, and conflict. As I just mentioned, the war-torn theme could really permeate throughout all this, and that brings me on to my second point, which is I'd love to see some more war-torn maps from the get-go. Of course, a lot of the maps look war-torn now, but they didn't back at launch, and even now I do think the 2042 maps do look a little bit sterile compared to, the rampant visual destruction from Battlefield 1 and 5. And I'm not talking about, actual destruction as in the player does it, but there are buildings which are slightly crumbled and things like that that look really great, and I'd love to see stuff like that really brought into the next game. Show us these settings that were in 2042, but really bring them down to our level, make them grounded, make them destroyed. I think it'd be great. One of the biggest talking points for 2042 was, of course, the plus system, and I actually quite like it. However, I do feel like it provides too much versatility to some guns, so I'd love to see it brought forward into the next game to allow people to switch on the fly what they want to do with their setups, but also limit it a little bit more in terms of some weapons. For example, the BSVM can be turned from a pretty good SMG-like rifle to a long-range marksman rifle in a couple of seconds, and I think that's kind of mad. It really messes with balance, and although it's quite a cool experiment for 2042, I do feel like it could be toned down a little bit to make it seem more manageable and more balanced for the next game. I feel like as a dev it would be quite hard to manage so many guns that can be used in so many different ways and can be transformed, and you have to try and keep on top of all of that while maintaining the meta. I feel like that'd be quite difficult, and while I'd love the system to be brought over, maybe turn it down a little bit. Another system I'd love to see continued is the call-in system. This is actually really great, but there are some issues with it in 2042, and the main one is the fact that you can call in tanks. And not just that you can call in tanks, but you can call in tanks anywhere you want. Jump on top of a skyscraper with a Tor, and you can take down basically any vehicle on the maps like Hourglass from a vantage point where no one can get you because you're too high up for Liz missiles some of the time, and someone's going to have to sacrifice an air vehicle to jump out and try and get you. This is incredibly powerful, so I'd love to see maybe either a restriction put on some tanks on some objects for call-ins in the next game, so you can't just bring them onto the top of some skyscrapers that are sitting just inside of the map boundaries, or limit it to just transports. So you can call in vehicles, but it'll just be a Jeep with minimal weapons, or it'll be something like a MAV, or something to really aid the team rather than bringing in some high value tank armor into the battlefield in just the click of a button. I feel like the actual flow of a battle will be a lot more readable if those attacking lines are maintained throughout by bringing in, tanks at the bases on either side rather than dropping in wherever the players want to in the middle. It'll make the battles feel a lot more cohesive, and I like the system. Again, I just like it turned down a little bit. Next up, let's talk helicopters, because we have some in 2042, and specifically I want to talk about transport helos, which originally were the Condor and the Hind, but now we actually don't have any. We have the Nightbird, but it's not available to spawn on unless you're in the squad of the person who's flying it, and that's pretty much it. The Hind and Condor only have 2 transport seats and the rest are gunners, so I'd love to see, if not in 2042, then in the next Battlefield game, an actual transport helo that just has maybe 2 miniguns and that's it, and then 4 or 5 seats for people who really want to be transported around the map. I think that would be really cool. Give us some more Hueys or futuristic Hueys or any of the transport helos on the Russian and US side that are in, production right now. Amp them up a little bit for the future or keep them as they are. And I think we'd have a really big improvement over, the vehicle meta and the balance that we have now. Right, let's fire off the next few before we get into the really big topic. So I'd love to see animations continue as they are. I know some of the animation staff have left since, season 1 and 2, but the people who are doing the animations now are still very solid. The ones in 2042 are really satisfying, they're grounded and feel good. So as long as they're brought over to the next game in terms of the animators who are doing it now, I think we'll be solid there. And realistically, the only way is up for the animations in my opinion. I think they are just going to keep getting better. I also want to see classes return, possibly. I don't really mind the specialist system, and maybe you can keep the specialist system, but I'd love to be able to maybe design your own specialist. And I will get onto what I kind of want to happen with specialists in a minute, but for the sake of multiplayer, I'd love to see it maybe brought either back down to classes or just fully customizable soldiers where you can then pick your loadout and, choose a class from the character that you create. I do actually quite like the idea of having weapons for everyone though, in terms of specialists or classes. I think that did work quite well for 2042. Some people do argue, the issue of readability. You might be coming up on a Casper or a sniper and they turn around and they have an SMG. That can be an issue, but I do like the aspect of player freedom of being able to choose whatever you want. So that's a bit of a double-edged sword, but I do like the idea 2042 is going for in terms of weapon selection for each class. So thumbs up there. I kind of hope that's carried over to the next game, although if it isn't, I will understand. And finally, let's talk about campaign, portal, and multiplayer. Let's start with the easiest, which is multiplayer. Basically everything I've said in this video. I'd love a server browser back, they're always very useful. Community servers on there too would be great. Bring us as many maps as possible, as many guns as possible, gadgets, vehicles, weapons, all that good stuff. I mean, that kind of goes without saying. We just want a solid multiplayer sandbox. And I think 2042 really does have one, so you can't really go wrong from there. Just refine it for the next title, and we're in good territory. In terms of Portal, I'd love to see Portal expanded into something more cohesive. Bring in all the Battlefield titles, or even go for a full MCC approach where you have all of those titles available in multiplayer. That would probably require a complete redesign of how Portal works, because right now it's running on top of 2042. It's kind of like an overlay with different mechanics. So going back and bringing them all into an MCC style game would require basically bringing all the framework from those games over, if I assume correctly. I think that's how MCC does it. It's not just, Halo Infinite with a skin or Halo 5 with a skin. They're all the games as they were. So that would kind of be what we need for a next Portal if we were going to go in that direction. But if we weren't, we could go for Portal as it is now, where it's based off the framework of the next game, but you just have a lot more content, and that's kind of what we want. Even if it starts off with a similar amount of content as this, first iteration of Portal had, I would like to see the upkeep of content kept going over time and built up upon, because Portal was thrown out there, and then we got a few weapons, a few vehicles, no more new maps, and that was kind of disappointing. I'd love to see it expanded on further for the next title. And finally, for the campaign, I'd love to see this as where the specialists really shine and thrive, because in multiplayer, they don't really get a chance to tell their stories outside of player cards and the little hints you get in between rounds. Let these characters be the ones that are played in the next campaign. Let us play as them in a squad. You can have multiple stories going on if you want to incorporate different squads of different specialist combinations. Maybe incorporate them into gameplay. Say you've got to get into a facility to take down some enemies, you can use Rao to hack the door. And then you can order maybe your squad mate Dozer to push in with a shield, or you could switch to him and push in with his shield, or if it's a co-op mission, you can do this in multiplayer. Something like that would be awesome, and it would give a chance for 2042's lore to breathe more than it does currently. In terms of story, I'm open to pretty much anything as long as it feels as grounded as it does now in terms of 2042, but in terms of a whole system of these campaign, Portal, and multiplayer, I'm honestly torn about what I want. Because we could have all of these separately and you have to pay for each of them, or maybe Portal will be free or the multiplayer would be free, but then two of them you'd have to pay separately for, and they'd probably be close to full price, if not full price. So it's really the question of, do we want an experience that is all tied together like 2042 is, but with a campaign and with Portal and with multiplayer, and possibly have a cut down on content, or would you rather have all these experiences split? So you pay for your campaign and you play that, or you pay for your multiplayer and you play that, or you pay for your Portal and play that, or you pay for all three and have them as three different applications separate from each other. It's really quite an interesting idea and conversation to have, because what would the player base really prefer? I'd imagine they'd be quite split on it in terms of, file size for each of these things and pricing. And to be honest, I don't really have any answers of what we could do to remedy that. It all rests on the shoulders of EA and DICE and depends what they really want to do. But I'm here for it. Anyway, that's my overall opinion on the next Battlefield title, what I want to see, what I don't want to see, and I'd love to hear all your ideas if you put them down in the comments below. Anyway, thank you all for watching. If you did enjoy, please feel free to like and subscribe. If you want to come and talk to me or anybody else that loves this game, head over to the No Salt Discord. The link is in the description below, and I'll see you all in the next video.